We thought there was an opportunity for people to take control back of their voice about how they see themselves. My professional experiences are a big piece of me, but they don't define me.
And I'm a big believer in serendipity, and I find that serendipity to be really powerful and really great. Be authentic, own what you've done, don't discount it at all. It's amazing.
Yeah, when you and I chatted last, I asked you a question, which I ask almost everyone when I first interview them, which is describing your childhood in one word. And you used the word vast. And that kind of took us down this conversation about your career, your life, where you've gone. And I just want to share some of that, with the audience and kind of dive into why you chose the word vast.
Yeah, I don't know how much you know about me, so we'll bore you for a little bit here. I grew up in a small farming community in the northeastern part of Indiana. Not exactly a real glamorous kind of fashion hotspot, so to speak. But
I lived next to a dairy for 12 years.
Oh, you did? All right.
So I got it.
So you got it.
Yeah.
But really kind of in a lot of ways, kind of an amazing place, right? I think if you're engineered in a different way, which maybe I was, there's a lot of opportunity, right? And so vast for me was like there's just this big canvas of things I can kind of go do. Right? If you're creative and you have a little motivation, you can definitely get people to enable you to do things, right? So I had lots of different jobs. It was quite industrious. I had lots of really cool jobs. I had some weird jobs.
What's the weirdest job? You can't just throw that out. I got to know.
I don't think there was a weirdest job, but there was some humbling jobs. I was a janitor for a while. I was a stock boy in a store, and that was a little bit of a difficult job because part of the stocking I had to do on Tuesdays was contraceptives and feminine hygiene products. And, it was just at a time where sophomore behavior was quite rampant. And so a lot of my friends would come in and really needle me, but, it was cool. It was all good. I've worked on a glue machine. I've been an umpire. I've been a camp counselor. I've just done a lot of different stuff. Later on in my life, it served me well to have done a lot of these weird jobs.
Have the weird experiences, yeah.
Yeah.
So entrepreneurial bug hit you a little bit later in life, right? Or
Definitely. I didn't start my first company until I was in my early 40s, which was a long time ago, believe it or not. In my early 40s. But I felt like, I kind of feel like the journey I was on almost from the beginning was quite entrepreneurial. I lived abroad for 10 years. I was constantly in situations where I was having to kind of figure it out on my own, make my own. Even in the construct of a company, it was still, hey, you're in Indonesia, figure that out, right? There's nobody else there on the ground. Like, sort it out and tell us what we should be doing strategically. So I had a lot of, a warm-up, so to speak.
Yeah. And then you dove in, and About Me would be the most public, right?
I think Sphere was quite substantial before that. That was my first company. And then we helped Matt kickstart, Tony and I helped Matt kind of kickstart WordPress along the way. And True Ventures, we were part of the founding team there. That helped start that. And those things all kind of came together at the same time. Sphere, WordPress, and True, I think, were within like 4 to 5 months of each other. So that was quite a prolific moment. But Sphere ended up being a rather large product, right, and a large success. So, now about .me, the story's still being written.
Right, still
sure.
Continuing. So now you've had a lot of opportunity to invest. Right, we talked a lot about this in our last convo. You've been a part of some really great successes, and obviously you've had some that didn't quite pan out in that direction. But what do you look for when you're investing into a company? What's the first thing that you dive into?
Well, I think a lot of people will say the same thing, but a lot of it's BS. Like when I kind of really dig into it. For me, it's genuinely about the founder. Where we're investing is at the inception point, right? It's really where the idea is being formed. In probably 95% of the cases, the company has never received any capital whatsoever. And if they have, it's been minuscule. So, there's not a lot to really dig into. There's not a lot to diligence, right? And so where I find and I get passionate about is super, over-indexing on kind of the founder and the why. And I think it throws a lot of people when they'll first meet with me, it might even throw them off guard because they come there and they got their presentation, and I want to honor that. They've put a ton of energy into it, and it's meaningful, right? And we need to get to it. But it's just like, let's just pump the brakes and let's just talk, right? And let me just get a sense of who you are, right? And sometimes, even when I get through that, I still don't quite get it. And I've ended up becoming really passionate about those founders because over time, as I got into their idea and stuff, I had the right foundation to better understand their perspective and what's triggering the way that they're acting, right? The way that they're moving. So for me, that's the most important thing. Everybody says it.
Right.
I think very few people in our craft actually ever really do the work.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just instincts and luck. You got to really drill in.
I completely agree. How do you drill down in that kind of scenario? Because as you said, they're coming in. Are you familiar with scan.me?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so good buddy of mine. They now do, you guys may have seen him online, the Bucket List family. He sold his company for $50 million to Scan and decided to take and sell all his possessions and go travel the world. And he said, I'll be back in 6 months.
Who doesn't want to do that?
Yeah. Well, he's got two toddlers, so that kind of was throwing the loop. But he said, I'll be back in 6 months, and that was 2 years ago. But he talks a lot about those first initial meetings, and he's a good friend, so we've dove into a lot of it. My thought is, how do you get that person who's so passionate about showing you the idea, showing you the product, showing you the direction, how do you get them to stop and actually then talk about that?
I'd tell them to stop.
Well, that's easy enough.
I mean, maybe it's my Midwestern roots, but it's pretty simple communication. It's just like, hey, let's just.
Is it pretty off-putting?
Oh, even I'll say figuratively, let's just put that down, right? Or turn your iPad over. Let's just talk. Give me your story, and I think we'll get into about.me hopefully in a little while, and I think it's you'll understand as we talk through this. You'll reference back and go, okay, I get what they're thinking there. But I'll give you a couple examples. How's that? I'll walk you through a couple stories of investments that we've made. One you know and one you don't yet. So Blue Bottle coffee is a unique one for us. It's totally off the radar of anything we should be licensed to do as investors. It's not, we're not consumer packaged goods experts. We're not retail experts. It's a path we almost never venture down. But when I sat down with James, he already had a few cafes, and I knew the brand it felt iconic to me in San Francisco, right? And there was a cafe also being opened in New York at the time. But what I did with James is I just wanted to understand his story and how he got there. And it was remarkable. He was very similar to my own entrepreneurial path in that he started late, probably late 30s, maybe 40-ish. He had a kid. He had recently, I think, been divorced. He started off doing his roasting beans, selling them in the farmer's market in Berkeley. He tells the cutest story ever. He auditioned for the Ferry Building farmer's market, to be the coffee stand in San Francisco. And he said two other companies were presenting, and before him, and they had carts and all this stuff, and he just showed up with a bag of paper, a paper bag of beans, a hand grinder. It was this weird, pour over at the time. And, he did his thing. And so I thought, okay, this is a guy who's got a unique kind of drumbeat to him, and, it's worth digging in further. And I was like, at the end of the day, what's really all that special about Blue Bottle versus any other coffee brand out there? It seems kind of red ocean. Red ocean's when it's really competitive and it's hard to understand, how are you really innovating and changing the world and moving things forward? And he's 50% of the people, half the people in the world drink coffee almost as the first thing they put in their body in the morning. I was like, yeah, I think it should be delicious. It should be pure. It should be beautiful. It should be based on a product of organic beans. It should be sourced correctly. It should have a certain freshness. The farmers that we work with should have an adherence to sustainability practices. Those farmers often are in really poor, underdeveloped areas, and they're doing small lots of coffee. And so he walked me through all of this, and I was like, okay, I got it. Like, this guy's got a real point of view about the space he's going to go play in. You know, he went on to tell me about how espresso drinks, there should not be served in to-go cups, because even if the consumer wants that, it's a bad experience, because espresso drinks should be served at a specific temperature, and they should be in a ceramic cup. And I'm part of me is like, is he wacko or is he like amazing, you know? And not wacko, you know. James, sorry. These things get, you know how it happens, right? It's like he says he's wacko, but you know, so
we'll just clip that out.
Yeah,
we'll clip that. I'll send it right to him. No worries.
I just thought he was amazing, and one of the most unique founders and most passionate and genuine, a real purity to his soul type founder, that I thought, like, I got to be involved in this. And so I initially thought I would invest personally, and we ended up investing as a firm. And you fast forward to today, you know, this is a company that has got all the characteristics of a big public market company that has tremendous soul. Amazing. The other one is a lady, this is a much shorter story, that we just invested in. And I don't think we've announced it yet, so I won't announce it here on stage. But you know, what was interesting about her, she's in the SaaS HR space, and this is one of those spaces, like, for me, like, I don't know, like, I'm not. Anybody here waking up and super passionate about SaaS HR, right? You know, it's not on my radar. Although we had a huge exit in a company we funded and I led called a Connectifier, which is from down in this area. That got bought for $250 million by LinkedIn. But anyways, so this company, she's kind of rough, and she's very sales oriented, and she's got a lot of, you know, just whatever character. And one of the things that came out was that she was the national women's rugby captain. And when I got that nugget, and it took a long time in our conversation of jostling back and forth to find that nugget.
Right.
I got it. Everything changed in the way that I looked at her and understood the way that she was geared and engineered, because she didn't look like other founders I had backed or we had backed. And I thought, like, this person's a total winner. I get it. They know how to lead. They know how to have a goal. They know how to do all these things. And she was hitting her plan. And she just wasn't hitting plan. She was crushing her plan, right, already. And she hadn't taken money. So, you know, throughout the process of funding her, she would send me notes. You know, 7 weeks ago when we first met and you committed and you got me to sign this term sheet, we were doing this MRR. Today we're doing this. You're a baller. Just like, absolutely. She's got that right.
How many in the audience have ever either you're looking for seed capital or have gone through the process of seed capital already? Yeah. So again, remember, we've got the mic. We can start opening up for questions in a minute once we kind of dive here a little more. But so let's circle back to about.me and kind of wrap that into what you're talking about. Like, what was the inspiration behind starting that?
So the context. You know, a simple page that gives people context of who you are and how you view yourself, what is important to you, and enables them then to springboard from that page into other areas where they can go deeper with you, right? So on LinkedIn, which is going to do a great job of representing your professional identity, to a Twitter, which is going to show your silliness and the breadth of your personality a little bit better. And, you know, like, each one of these things are slivers of who we are, but none of those services, in all due respect, should be given the license to represent your identity online. Absolutely not. And if you do that, I think you're fooling yourself, right? The context, I always call it the V, start way out here and understand the context of who the person is and how they tick and what is meaningful to them is the most important thing. And once you do that, then you can start to drill down into that professional context, into, okay, I think I gave you this example. I was out one night with some friends, and it was late night, and I think it was like the once a decade I smoke a cigarette. And it was like, 1 o'clock, and I think I was a little tipsy, and I was like, this is a great time to tweet. And I thought it was a really great tweet. I still kind of do, actually. And I said, sometimes I wish smoking were good for you. And because we all know it's not. And the next morning I woke up to an absolute shitstorm on Twitter. I have a good number of followers. It's like, my grandfather died of esophageal cancer, or, like whatever. Like, I just thought to myself, like, if somebody tunes in to Tony Conrad today, this is the day they want to like figure out, they're going to meet with me next week, and they're going to think, I'm that guy.
Right.
I'm not that guy, right? I'm not. And I know that, and I think most people that know me know that. And so that context is so important before you get there, because you only get one opportunity to make a first impression, right? It's true 100 years ago, true today, true in 100 years from now, and you should own it.
So did the about.me inspiration come before or after your shitstorm of tweets?
Oh, way before. I actually was tinkering on about.me in my head, back in 2004, 2005, as I started to see some of the social stuff popping up, and I just felt like it was going to be important to have, a simple identity page online, and also with Google, you're really, if you don't have any of these things, you're also fooling yourself, because you're on Google and you're basically outsourcing your identity to Google. I don't think that's a great idea. Google's a phenomenal company, awesome company, nothing bad to say about it, but it shouldn't represent my identity.
Right. It's an algorithm instead of really diving down to who you are. So,
yeah.
So what drives you now? What's the driving factor? I mean, for all extensive purposes of society and success, you could be done, right?
Yeah.
So,
I definitely could. I definitely could be done. I like working. I've always been industrious. I like being connected. I like culture. I like youth. I like the intersection, in particularly, of youth and culture. And so, tech is a great venue to continue to tap into that. I like invention. I love working with my partners. We've had no drama. True, I think, is probably the only venture firm that really doesn't have any drama.
Yeah.
It's, I think, there's a general level of happiness around the life I've kind of created, for myself to be a part of, right? And as I think forward, you get to this stage in your career, or this station in life, as a friend elegantly states it. And, that, like, for instance, I know I'm not going to do another startup, right? This is it. About.me works, fantastic. If it doesn't work, I'll be bummed, but, like, I'm not going to go do something else.
Right.
Funds, the way funds work, when you're a partner in a fund, you're signing up for a 10-year commitment. So, I'm 55. When we did our last fund in last year, 2016, I was 54. You can do the math. 10 years out, it's you got to think out, into that area. So, I think I'm spending some time thinking about that. Not retirement per se, but I'm just thinking about like how that all comes to its natural either conclusion, or it evolves in a way that's sustainable for a longer period of time. So, I'm definitely in that mindset.
How have you maintained, in all of our conversations, you just always have this like jubilee about you, right? You just, the smile.
What's not to be happy about?
Right. So, but how do you
Come on.
maintain that through this industry, right? These ups and these downs and the even flows, and like, what is your personal kind of morning ritual or daily, ritual? How do you stay in that space?
Well, I think you can, I've been doing the investing piece for over 20 years, and, I've been really lucky and fortunate and good at it, right? And in the beginning, I think there's a level of, at times there's a level of desperation, right? Because you just don't know if you're good at it. There's a famous thing called the J curve, Most of you probably don't even know what that is, but as an investor, you put a lot of money out, and your good companies, you kind of think they're good, but you don't really have any, really quantifiable proof.
Yeah,
you haven't had an exit. You haven't had, somebody value it in a different way. But your losers, I mean, like you see that right away, right? So what you're just hoping, you actually hope you get the J curve because you hope
because then it shoots up, right?
You can
and you
shoot
get the
back
eval.
up on the other side. So there's a part of my career where, I probably had more stress. Probably I wore that in different ways. I probably interacted with people sometimes in ways that like, wow, that's not ideal, because of the stress. But, once you kind of get through that and you can move towards success or have some success that you can anchor on, it just, success I've seen friends have success and it really has been detrimental to them. But most cases I find that success or some level of success calms people down. And it allows them to resurface and be the person that they genuinely kind of are. And I feel like, I'm a happy person. I've always had a certain naive belief that I was just going somewhere, I mean, when I was 5 years old, I knew I wasn't going to be living in Indiana. I remember that feeling clearly, right? 9 kids out of 122 in my graduating class went to college.
Right.
So, but I knew, right? And so...
did your parents support that, or did they?
Yeah, my parents were amazing. My parents are not, they're blue-collar people. They're not sophisticated people. I was the first person to go to college, in my family, or my family tree. They were amazing because they were supportive of me and they gave me that space, vast.
The vastness.
And they weren't teaching me math and vocabulary. I think I told you this story. Like, nobody told me to take the SATs. Luckily there was a principal counselor in our school who, on a Tuesday, said to me, "You haven't signed up."
This story pissed me off.
You haven't signed up for your SATs, and they're this Saturday. You seem like one of the kids that might go to college. I was like, yeah, like, what's SAT? And he's like, it's an exam you have to take.
On a Tuesday, okay? Just remember this.
It's a different era.
Yeah,
honestly,
whatever.
My generation, all the East Coast kids were studying for it, for sure. But, a lot of kids weren't. Today, everybody does. But I took it on Saturday, right?
Got a...
I did really well.
Yeah, like really well, like top 5% well.
Yeah, I did well.
Yeah.
But that's,
I studied for like a month and failed.
I'm sure you didn't.
No, you just say the word test with me and I got to go to the bathroom. Immediate, have to urinate every time.
Yeah, I don't like taking tests either, like no more than anyone. But, so my parents weren't doing that. But they were, I grew up in an incredibly stable family, an incredibly, what I'll call a classic middle-class family, in a community that was incredibly supportive. And I know at my heart I was a little bit different, right, than most of the people there. And it teaches you a lot about how to fit in, and how to not alienate, right?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be the asshole in a 5,600 person community.
Right. We were just talking about this, about somebody from Germany, from Cologne, talking about the tighter your community is, the more it forces you to be human and to work through those social skills.
Yeah, and you develop a lot of empathy, right? Because you open up and you meet a lot of interesting people, and it served me incredibly well throughout my life. It allowed me to pick up a mop and be a janitor in a fraternity. Right? And I think there's probably no more thing that's humbling than that.
No, not
at
too
least
many.
in my life.
Yeah. Cleaning toilets is about as humble as you can go. So.
Yeah, that sucked.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you mentioned youth and like hanging out with youth. You just got back from like a month-long trip, right, with Kevin and Tim.
Yes.
Doing you were the elder companion. Is that a fair thing to say? But you seemed,
They call me Papa Duck.
right, just like Tim Ferriss and Kevin Rose in this expedition across Japan or wherever you guys were. It was
Well, we were in Japan, and I was with the guys for 10 days, and it was a little bit of work. We have some stuff on Blue Bottle that's going on there. We have 6 cafes now, and James Freeman, the founder, was there, and so he and I did some work. But then most of it was to celebrate Kevin's birthday, and
But do you find that just like to be around that youthfulness and that energy, is that something that you're addicted to? Almost like it's part of your routine that you want to be around?
I'm not addicted to it, but I like it, right? I'm involved with the Tony Hawk Foundation, and the thing that really resonated with me when Tony asked me to join was how this really represented the intersection of a lot of things I care about. I care about local, I care about youth, and I care about culture.
Right.
And just mental well-being for all of us. And so, I think it's really fascinating to me, right? It's not just the enjoyment. Like, I got lots of old friends too, trust me. And I've got friends much older than me, that we hang out with and do things on the weekend and all that kind of stuff. So I don't need it in that way, but I do enjoy it. And I love, I love millennials. I see the good in them.
You don't hear that phrase very often. I love millennials.
Well, I do. I do think that they're absolutely setting the stage for the next generation,
right,
to truly reinvent the entire thing, right? The social structures of how we live. I don't think the millennials are going to do it, but I think the millennials are going to...
Setting the foundation,
I think
the
they're
framework.
setting the foundation, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll give you a stat. We learned this on About.me, because the core audience for About.me that uses it and gets the most value out of it are freelancers, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, people that have a side hustle, a side passion project, and whatever. So we do a lot of work around that demographic. And we also do a lot of work around college students, because they use our product because a lot of them don't look particularly strong on a service like LinkedIn at this stage of their life, right? And our product is going to showcase them in a much more holistic, interesting way. And so, we've kind of dug into this group, and one of the things that blew me away is that 76% of college students today think that they'll have a second job. They'll have a primary job and they'll have a secondary job.
At the same time.
Absolutely. 76%. That is unprecedented. That is a direct reflection of the side hustle, which is the cool in vogue
right.
term that the millennial generation is driving. Absolutely.
Do you find that's going to be a distracting force or a beneficial?
I don't know. I think it'll be great.
We'll
I
have to
believe
play it
in
out.
humanity.
Yeah.
Last time I checked, 100 years ago, things were a lot worse than they are today.
Right. Right. Yeah, we're going to talk about that to some level coming up next ways. If you were to say and I know this is putting you on the spot, but like, what do you find is your sweet spot, your skill, the thing that that's your gift?
Patience.
Okay. Patience in which aspect? Personal,
Patience
business?
I probably have different skills for different aspects of my life, but as an investor and as a partner, definitely patience, right? And to give people enough room to kind of find their own direction and become accountable, right? As opposed to micromanaging and handling it all. There's a difference between being hands-off and being, attentive or inattentive. I'm attentive.
Yeah.
I may be hands-off, but I'm attentive, and I'm patient.
It's a good quality. Our mutual friend Gary's talking a lot about patience right now in the entrepreneurial space. So It's a buzzword for sure, but good. Ryan.
Yeah, first off, I'm a huge admirer of your work and your portfolio, so it's a privilege to ask you this question.
Oh, thank you.
I'm currently creating a growth engine to help founders scale at a certain point after some validation. So from your viewpoint, what is the key pain point for founders or teams of founders at that point when they're ready to scale?
The key pain point for founders is not a business problem. It's a human problem. It's the emotional intelligence and challenges to emotional intelligence
We were talking about this morning.
that one has as a founder are enormous. Everybody carries a different bag on their shoulder in this regard. I included every single person I've known that's founded a company. It doesn't matter if they're great, flawed, they all carry the same bag. So I think that's the biggest single issue that they have. The issue from a business perspective, from a does the startup start or not, is it falls in probably a couple different camps. One is, are people willing to put their idea out there? And it's one thing to release it, but actually really put it out there in a forceful way, right? Put your personal currency on the line to get people to interact with it and expose you, right? The ridicule, even for somebody like me who had successes, when I launched About.me initially, was, could have been really painful, if I had not been experienced, because a lot of people are like, well, that's dumb, that's simple, like whatever. Yeah, well, okay, I get the last laugh because we're, millions and millions and millions of people on the platform, But I think you have to be able to expose yourself out there. And then the other thing is, I think there's a lot of great technology. This overlaps a little bit with the first one, but there's a lot of great technology, especially in the Valley, that just is sitting on the Valley floor. It's like, the figurative film, that gets cut, it just doesn't ever see market. It just doesn't really ever work. And that's because I think a lot of founders are very engineering-centric, very software-driven centric, algorithmically driven, data-driven, and they forget the human component of like, well, I still got to create a following for this, and I've got to be able to, do some creative ways of outreach. When we launched About.me, when I launched Sphere, the thing I learned was take my partners and make my partners my best advocates, right? And the association was amazing. So Sphere, what it did was it was AI, it's content matching. What it would do is could machine read, an article. This is in 2004, guys, so this is like novel. Even Google, this is what AdSense is kind of based on, right? But it could read an article, figure out the subject matter, not the sentiment, but could figure out what it's about, and then find other things across the web that were contextually relevant to that, right? And so online, one of the things you'll see is hyperlinked, articles, right? That go New York Times referencing it back to other New York Times articles or CNN, or even some of these guys were really progressive in the day. They would actually link out to blogs, right, and do other things, and video and audio and all that stuff. We were able to do that, right? For an editor to do that is so time-consuming, is mind-boggling. And so we figured this out, and we put a little button that sat on the bottom of every article, and we ended up being on over 30 billion, monthly impressions of articles going out. Right? It was kind of crazy.
Wow.
And it would generate those things. So I learned that by having that little button on TechCrunch, that GigaOM was going to have it, and then VentureBeat was going to have it, and then Recode was going to have it, and then I was going to go to the Washington Post and get them to do it in their tech thing, and then because it's in the tech thing, it'd move its way into the politics and whatever. So we figured out that reference, visible reference, be part of something that's cool. So when I got to About.me, I took a step back and I thought, okay, how do we create an environment here where we can tell the community that this thing is actually okay? So it's interesting.
When you say partners as advocates, you mean like those kind of your what most people would say, I guess, would be clients or whatever, is actually getting
Well, they were my
the
clients, and they were
strategic.
paying us,
Right.
but they were actually doing the work for
They were,
us.
right. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
We convinced them, this before there was any other social media icon at the bottom of an article, right? To get the New York Times to put a button for a third-party service
Right.
at the bottom. We see it everywhere today. We did that. My team invented that, right? Kevin Rose, why I know Kevin Rose, because he was doing Dig, and he said that was the coolest freaking thing he'd ever seen.
How do we
right?
how do we
How did
replicate
you do that,
Yep.
and how do we go do this? Okay, so the thumbs up kind of concept. So when I got to About.me, I was thinking, how do we create this event? And we ended up having 26 advisors for a 4-person team. 26 advisors. And these are some people that are fairly, famous and well-known people, not celebrities, although Tony Hawk is one of our advisors. But they're people like, Kevin Rose or Tim Ferriss or Chris Sacca or Veronica Belmont. These are people that have millions. A lot of them were getting up to about 1 million followers on Twitter, which doesn't seem like that much. This is 2010, 2011. When we launched, we had 35 million Twitter followers amongst that group. And if even you said half of them are overlap,
Right.
17.5, half of them are bots.
Right.
We're getting into the range of 7.5 to 10 million people that these advisors were saying, you should have an About.me page. It's awesome. Go do it, right? And just based on that, we were able to create this incredible lift. That's the kind of stuff that a lot of entrepreneurs don't get.
That's a huge nugget. Does everyone truly see how vertical that could be within what you're doing? And
Now it's
the
played
importance?
out because all those guys
Right, but there's still
and
so many
gals are
opportunities.
they're exhausted being asked to do
Right,
these
right.
things. But we saw the opportunity and we nailed it. And we gave them all a little bit of equity in the company. But we only gave away, for 26 advisors, 2.75% of our company.
Wow. And then instantly had a 7 million plus audience.
Yeah,
So leverage.
leverage.
Love it. Question.
Since you're so successful in dealing with entrepreneurs at the very beginning, how do you deal with an entrepreneur who, in the very early stages, is the right person to grow the company, but then at a later point may not be able to take it to the next step?
This happens all the time.
The story we chatted about the guy that called you out, said that you failed him.
Yeah, I have. I do. I have some good stories. I'll give you a bad one. How's that? I had an entrepreneur, incredibly well-respected entrepreneur. This was even like in the last 10 years, right? Where he has a good company, definitely a really good company. Not a rocket ship, but like a very solid to good company. He's doing kind of well. He's struggling a little bit, struggling with fundraising for whatever reason. I helped, I felt like I did a lot, right, to kind of help him get capitalized at various junctures. I put a lot of my own personal sweat and energy into it. I was really behind him and behind the company. But we got to a point where, I felt that, he would benefit by having a partner around the table. And that's not a euphemism for, we're going to kick you out of your company. It's just a genuine, like Matt Mullenweg with Tony Schneider at WordPress before, or James Freeman with Brian Meehan today at Blue Bottle. It's just like, come on, what's our goal here?
Right.
And I think, you'll benefit, right, from somebody. And who knows, maybe you'll come back and become CEO. That's what happened with Matt. That conversation, I didn't handle that conversation in a very smart way because I hadn't planned for it. It was in the back of my mind for a long time. Patience, observation, attentiveness. But we were having lunch and it just kind of naturally came out, right? And he was upset, but he wasn't that upset right there. But later on, he was really upset. And, I remember it was months, maybe even 9 months later. And, you know, we're doing a phone call. And I said, hey, listen, I'm going to, you know, we'd gone through this. And I felt like we weren't functioning, you know, very well. And there was a new CEO there and everything. And I said, this is a good time for, you know, which I often do. I'll get off boards and, you know, because I have a company to run too, right?
Right.
And so my partner, Phil, said, you know, I'll jump in here. This is a good company. I like the guys and, you know, and the team. Let's go do it. And he said, you know, you failed me. And I was thinking, like, God damn it, you know, like I've done all this, you know, in my head. I'm like,
sweat equity,
I've done
the money,
so much
right.
stuff for you. I have kicked ass for you. I have performed for you. And then he said, he's like, you so failed me. You never taught me how to be a CEO. And I thought, wow, he was right. I didn't see that as my job, right? And I still don't see it as my job. But it is absolutely part of the human equation, and it is absolutely something that, you know, I could have framed the whole context of what we were doing in a different way, right? Which was very much that, like, let's get a professional CEO in, and you be a part of this, right? And let's, you know, you'll learn a lot, you know, but I didn't say any of those things. I had really failed him. And so I think that's, you know, the biggest thing is, you know, a lack of sitting down and checking in and understanding, back to the earlier point about the human aspects of this world we live in, the pressures on founders and entrepreneurs and people that are early team members. You know, you just got to ask, like, how you doing? You know, like, I'd forgotten all the human aspects of our relationship. It just became, as it became a little bit more, as there was noticeably a little more friction and challenge, you know, the tendency was when we would connect, we would dig in, we'd go right to the business challenges. I forgot all the human stuff. Never asked him about his, you know, I'd ask him a little bit, but, you know, it wasn't front and center. I never asked him if, like, hey, are you paying yourself enough money? You know, and like he rattled off all these things and
right.
how I had failed him. And it was a great lesson, you know, and so that was hurtful, you know, because at my stage I thought, like, I'm better than that. And I don't see myself as being that kind of investor. So it took a good year. I gave it space, patience again. But you know, then I eventually, you know, I asked him if he could come in and help me, right? And I thought that was really important for me to ask for his help and for him to tell me about some things that we needed to do at About.me. And you fast forward and, you know, he's my key advisor, you know, today, right? And so, you know, I always had a commitment to this person. I always really was very fond of this person. And I felt like it was an unintended consequence that we'd gotten kind of to a spot where we weren't good and that we should be good in life. So, you know, and I think he felt that way obviously too. It's reciprocal. So we were able to do that. It's, you know, in most cases though, you know, you got to check your ego. It's not about you. You know, if you're a founder, you have the best title in the company. It doesn't matter what you are. I mean, it does, because you should do what you enjoy and where you
right.
think you're most gifted, you can make the best contributions. And if that's a CEO, then great, go do it. But if it's not, you should not let your ego get in the way. You should check it. And you should get that person or those persons around you who can do those jobs. And I'm always amazed that, you know, if you spend enough time and you're thoughtful about this conversation, it can go really very smoothly, right? Because if you don't, what ends up happening is in the previous case, that person just left his company. What a shame, right? He could have added so much incredible value to that company. That's on me, not him. All right? I created an environment where he hated his company so much because he hated the fact he wasn't CEO because he felt like he had been done a disservice, right? So if you can shift that dialogue and have it throughout a long period of time where it's depersonalized, then everybody can make the right decision. Okay? I'm not a CEO killer, I'm not a founder killer. Those are antithetical to everything I believe in, right? And I think you'll find, 99% of the cases I've done it well.
Yeah. I think, that piece of nugget, drop the ego, look for supporting staff. I think that's so powerful. So we have some more hands up here. And
What do you think is the root cause for why women have such a hard time getting funded and access to capital?
So I'm not sure I heard your question.
why women have a hard time getting funding and capital?
Well, I don't actually know if that's 100% true, right? I don't. I don't know those stats. There's a lot of things about the tech community and gender that bothers me. A ton of stuff. And I don't know about the funding thing because I also don't like, if I see 20 deals, I don't know what percentage of them are have a female co-founder or a female lead
I've heard
founder.
that it's something like 2% of all venture capital goes to women.
Well, I'm going to give you some things that I am concerned about, right? That I do know the data. So, as an industry, when you look for early stage companies and you look at the number of them that have, female CEOs or female executive team members, the number by stage, it gets worse. The earlier the stage, the worse it is. And I've looked at that data and it's like, okay, like that can't continue, right? And the moment to impact that is the place where we're uniquely positioned actually to have an influence on it and to impact it. It's just being aware of it, right? So because we are those earliest investors in these companies.
You're hitting it right at the beginning.
It is something that is amazing. There's a company in our portfolio that I share an office with. I'll actually name them because they're a phenomenal example of everything that's right. In that, they were male founders. I think there's 3 or 4 of them. They had a small dev team. When they moved into the office, I think they were 11 or 12. They were all men. And, I just remember thinking that's so not cool. It's like, there was my team, which is like, I think it's like 40, 60,
right.
It's like, so it's like, ugh. And they're young, really young, and a little sophomoric, and they want to put ping pong tables in and all this stuff that's just like really a turn off, right? For women, or some women. And so I just said to him, like, what are you doing how are you thinking about gender diversity? And he's like, well, and I was like, well, it's important. It's not a check in the box concept. It's about the culture you're creating, and it's going to improve your company, right? And you fast forward to today, and they're, I want to say 75, 80 people, and I got to believe they're 40%, right? So he got it and he did that. One of the areas that I've looked at recently was boards, and I thought this was even more alarming. Because when you looked across, when we looked across boards, the number is sub, it's sub 5%, right? And when you looked at, so we did our own little exercise, for our portfolio years ago, and we have changed it a lot, so don't hook me on these numbers. But what was interesting was we mirrored that. We were really no different than that. But I asked a question. This is about being attentive and asking a good question. I said, hey, Christian, can you go and can you splice the data a little differently for me? Run it. How many of the independent board directors where we as board members have named a third-party person to sit on the board, what percentage of them are women? We had 2 people.
Out of
200 companies. 2. Well, at the time, actually, it was 120 companies, right? 2. right? That tells you, that's the real data, right? Yeah, we had women founders on boards, absolutely. We had women that were already the CEO, absolutely, they're on the board, but those are not choices, right? Those are things that are already embedded in the way that it gets structured. And so, it's just something where it's just front and center to me. And it's like a little personal pet project. And I really don't like talking about it so much because it feels like this, and that's not the goal. But it's something I can impact. So there's 2 women that just joined the Tony Hawk Foundation board. I have the first board member I named was Veronica Belmont. It was so empowering to my team.
Right.
Across the board. Gender neutral, it did not matter. It was so powerful to them that the person that we named, right, was a female. It said so much about, what they wanted to be a part of, I think. And so I'm super proud of that.
We've been talking about that today of how do you make a change, how do you make a difference, and
Well, you
we
just
tie
do
it back to doing it, right? Just one person making the decision and doing it. And this is a beautiful example. You have a high profile, people pay attention to what you're doing, and I will pat you on the back because it's important. More people need to make those conscious choices and allow others to see that, right? It's a framework. It's something that we can bitch about it, or we can make something happen. And I think that's the key. And you make what you have control over. So.
Yep.
Beautiful. And thank you
Anyways,
so
thanks
much.
for the question.
Yeah, thanks
Wes,
so
that was
much
awesome.
for coming.
Thank you guys
Appreciate
for
it so
having me. I
much.
really appreciate it.